It is widely believed around the world that Franklin Roosevelt was a Keynesian economist, and further that the intention behind the Bretton-Woods system was also Keynesian. Now, both of these are untrue. Roosevelt was an American, and as an American, he was looking at the Bretton-Woods Conference as a way to eliminate colonialism and rebuild the sovereignty of nations around the world. Keynes was a Brit, and he was looking toward Bretton Woods as a way to further consolidate British imperial control over the rest of the world. Their intentions were completely different. Now, John Maynard Keynes is a central banker, a monetarist, where human activity is subsidiary to the financial system. So what does this mean? This means that the purpose of your economic system is not to raise the standard of living of your nation, or to increase the creativity and happiness of your society. Rather, Keynes's purpose was to maintain the top-down oligarchical control of nations, as Zeus oppressed Prometheus for giving fire to man in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound, to destroy any creativity in the society. Keynes, in a word, is a fascist. So what's the Keynesian view of mankind? As is easy to see from many of his writings and speeches, it is not the individual human mind which is the value in your economy. It is the labor and the sweat of the brute worker which is valued in your economy. Keep them dull, dumb, and occupied. Under Keynes's economic system, it would be better to have 10 million people employed in meaningless, low-grade, low-wage work, rather than 9 million employed in productive, mission-oriented jobs. He would pay you to dig a hole and fill it back up again for no reason at all. Hey, you can employ a lot of people digging holes. Isn't that what Roosevelt did? It's true that Roosevelt created a massive amount of jobs and production in the build-up toward World War II. However, those people employed were not just digging holes. Every one of Roosevelt's projects, job creation programs, and legislative efforts were subsumed under the constitutional principle of promoting the general welfare of the nation as a whole. Roosevelt and Harry Hopkins institutions, such as the WPA, the REA, and so on, drew on projects which were already on the books as necessary steps to rebuild the physical economy, the capacity for production, agriculture, and industry across the entire United States. This capacity, in turn, allowed us to furnish the arsenal of democracy which was used to secure victory in World War II. Now, this method was to be used as the blueprint for the kind of industrial and economic development necessary to turn the former colonies of the British Empire into independent and sovereign nations following the end of the war. With Roosevelt, the general welfare principle comes first. You initiate infrastructure and other such projects to promote the general welfare, and then fund these projects through credit uttered by acts of Congress. With Roosevelt, the people came first. With Keynes, the money comes first. Your projects are determined by the amount of available money in your central banking system. Therefore, the principle of the general welfare isn't even considered. What does this mean for the Bretton Woods system in 1944 and today? What Gordon Brown proposes today is the same as Keynes's proposal then: turn the IMF and the World Bank into a large-scale international central banking system under the control of the Anglo-Dutch liberal imperial apparatus. Though the IMF and World Bank function very much like that today, Roosevelt's purpose for these institutions was to use them as lenders subordinate to the principles of the U.S. Constitution. The World Bank was to utter the credit necessary in U.S. dollars for the funding of large-scale infrastructure projects, and the IMF was to be a vehicle of stability to regulate the fixed exchange rate system and to ensure that financial and currency warfare were not possible. With Roosevelt's death, his intention for the Bretton Woods system came under attack by Harry S. Truman. However, the cultural optimism and productive capacity created under Roosevelt would not be killed overnight. Therefore, the IMF and the World Bank were brought completely under British control, and more importantly, the population of the United States, upon whose principles world economic recovery were possible, was morally and culturally corrupted as well, a corruption which is carried through to this very day. If you compare the statements issued both by Roosevelt and Lord Keynes at the end of the Bretton Woods Conference, it becomes very clear that Roosevelt was not a Keynesian. Rather, he was fighting to promote the American system of economics and use it to destroy the Keynesian system, which is promoted to this day by the British Empire. That same fight against the British Empire is being led today by Lindon Larush, and it is the fight that every single leader in every single nation all over the world must join in order for this civilization to survive. Those who would advocate a Keynesian policy at this time are upholding that same fascist oligarchical tradition which is plunging the entirety of civilization into a dark age. Кейnс said it himself in his preface to the German edition of his General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. His system of economics is much more easily adapted to the conditions of a totalitarian state, such as the very Nazi Germany that Roosevelt was out to defeat.